Morning, everybody. We're excited to get this week going. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dan. I'm the Dan Casey at Sheridan. I'm the chair of CHMA, allegedly. We've been hard at work over the last few months putting this together. Pretty happy to see everybody here, and I know there's going to be a whole bunch more coming. So should be a pretty good week. We wanted to avoid having people sit in front of a computer for 8 hours a day, so we've condensed a few things over the course of the week. So this week we hope to have a program that brings ideas and strategies to your team that as a whole, instead of just focusing on our food and beverage services. So we've invited your marketing teams, your service teams, your administrative teams to help provide value to your campus communities as a whole. We have a renewed emphasis on campus life in the coming months as we welcome back staff and students to our institutions. Now that we're closer to the end of the ongoing pandemic, we can focus our attention on what's next and how to get there. The past 16 months have been life-changing for all of us, and hopefully nearing a new beginning to our students and ourselves as professionals. Just a few quick notes before we kick off. Be engaged, join the conversation, share your ideas, your best practices, and some of your experiences. Many of us are itching to get back into the thick of things, and we want to be ready to hit the ground running when we do. Find your action items, challenge yourselves to find 2 or 3 ideas or strategies over the course of this week, and see how you can roll them out in your institutions and how you can see them through. This is a great opportunity to get our wheels turning and make positive changes to impact our operations. And reach out to each other through Slack messaging. I know there's only a couple of us on there now. This is sort of an ongoing chat over the course of the week. We've got Facebook, we've got the Twitter, we've got on the website. The member platforms are there for you to take advantage of them. The group is an incredible resource for all of us and will provide as much value as we put into it as individuals. Don't be afraid to ask questions or get the conversation going. That's what these platforms are for. A little bit of housekeeping and how to access some of the resources on the conference. Housekeeping, please respect one another. We're practicing active listening, so please mute yourselves if you're not speaking. Turn your camera on for some FaceTime and show what you look like on a lovely Monday morning here from sweaty Oakville. We're using Zoom meetings for all of our meetings this week to encourage engagement and interaction. A lot of you have probably spent a lot of time on Zoom this year, so let's try to make it fun. And if you want, change your view to a speaker view, and then you'll be able to see all the presenters nice and clearly. And you're probably all looking at my mug right now. We're also recording all the sessions. We'll be posting them on the website as well. All the sessions are available for everybody that found them here so far on chmaevents.com. You should all have your login. If you have any issues, just email info@chmaonline and Laura can help you through. Please take time to visit our virtual trade show and engage with our partners and sponsors. Book a live meeting, ask questions, order some more samples. I know you guys all got your sample kits last week. Hopefully you all got a good sugar rush from the cookie dough. All of those samples that were available to us, those are available across Canada. All those vendors will ship right across the country. And the waffles, they make a really good breakfast sandwich. But anyways, so like I said, I'm Dan, I'm the chair, and now I get to introduce Joe. Joe led our fall symposium with a conversation about emotional intelligence, so we knew right away that we wanted to have him involved in our conference this year. As a passionate leader within Canada's tourism, hospitality, and education sectors, he's focused on strengthening hospitality and tourism organizations and people through transformational strategy, coaching, training, and talent. Joe was previously Dean at Centennial College's School of Hospitality, and he held senior management roles at George Brown College's Center for Hospitality and Culinary Arts, including Director of Operations, Services, and Partnerships. Joe has led many teams at various hotels and restaurants as well. We couldn't think of a better person to help kick off this week, and I'd like to welcome Joe to the stage. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you. I'm going to do my little technical switch over here. Let's see if this goes according to plan. How's that? Got that? Amazing. It's great to see all of you. I had as Dan mentioned, a great opportunity to speak a little bit about emotional intelligence, but unfortunately there were some technical glitches. You couldn't see me and I couldn't see you. So it really is nice to see your smiling faces in your backgrounds. As we began, for those of you who were involved in that session, I'd like to begin this session as well. Let's just do a little bit of intentional grounding. And so all I want you to do is just, as you're sitting in your chair or if you're standing up, just plant your feet on the ground just for a moment. And I just ask that you put your hands just on your legs, on the tops of your legs. Just take a couple of deep breaths. Yeah, good. You can see you shifting a little bit. We're focused. We're here together. You guys have an amazing week of engaging content lined up. This has been one heck of a year. And we're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about reinvention, talking about change, talking about transformation. And all I ask of you for the next hour is that you stay here with me. I know there's competing demands in your life, within your house, your profession, your office, wherever you are. Just try to focus as much as possible. And if you have to go and attend to something, then of course, go right ahead and do that. But just come back to this when you get sitting back down again. Just ground yourself in this moment. Let's be really intentionally focused about this. All right? Amazing. Thank you. So let's get right into what we're talking about today. So why on earth are we kicking off this week with a conversation about reinvention? Why? I mean, of course, the last year or so, we've been completely disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. But that in and of itself isn't the driving force behind our focus on reinvention. And what I think is really cool about this week, and what's really important about this conversation, is reinvention, change, transformation isn't exclusively about the hospitality industry or campus food service or campus accommodation. That's not what it's about. Reinvention, change, transformation can be equally applied to your personal life, to your own career, to your role, your business, and much larger issues. So that's where I want you to focus that mindset. I want you to focus on the fact that we are talking today about reinvention broadly. I'm going to take you through a dialogue. There are going to be lots of practical tool takeaway components. Yes, of course. But I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you to stay present. I'm going to challenge you to think big, a little bit outside your comfort zone for a Monday morning. And I'm going to ask you to try as much as you can as you're going through this topic of conversation to continue to ground it within yourself. How can I apply this to me? How does this relate to me? Because that's where we're going to see that profound change. The typical starting point of anybody's change journey is recognizing that there's something in your life, in your profession, in your career that you want to improve on. And that's the focus of this presentation today. Great. So why are we talking about reinvention? Again, the pandemic came along and took us off our center. It knocked us over. But reinvention itself is a strong force as it relates to our professions, our personal lives, our businesses, and all of those pieces. Before we get into specifically how it applies to the context that we're talking about today, I want to walk you through a live business case. It's something that you're going to be familiar with, and it's probably completely outside the scope of what you focus on most of the time. And I'm doing that intentionally because I want you to try to see how reinvention works through the lens of some businesses that you probably already know. So this case study is about the world's first wildly successful handheld digital device, and how that organization was forced to reinvent itself as a result of a disruption it could not anticipate. And that the result of that reinvention was, in fact, a considerable improvement on that original idea, and something that took them into a completely different direction, but still grounded in the original idea of their business. So let's talk about the world's first wildly successful handheld digital device. You ready for this? The early year Apple iPod. That's not actually what we're going to talk about right now, but it's always a good example because Apple is often used as an innovative space. But we're not going to talk about that because that's a bit too traditional, and I know that you guys are looking for something unique. So let's talk about, the BlackBerry. Also not actually what we're talking about. It wasn't the world's first wildly successful handheld digital device either. And actually, it's interesting because BlackBerry is often known as an organization that hung on to something that was so precious to it that it was unable to reinvent itself. And that, of course, was that physical keyboard. You're looking at that right now. You're thinking, oh, yeah, I remember my thumb was flying. And that's what BlackBerry was all about. Also not, though, even though it predated the original Apple iPod, not the world's first wildly successful handheld digital device. Ready for it? Here it is. Anybody recognize this beauty, this marvel of technology? This is the Palm Pilot. Yes, the Palm Pilot. Actually, the name of the company is Palm. This model is the Pilot. The Palm Pilot in the early 90s was the world's first wildly successful handheld digital device. Why is that relevant? Well, how many Palm Pilots are around now? How many people are still even using Palm Pilot? I don't even know. I mean, the company exists, but it's not existing in the way that it exists now. Let's talk a little bit about this because some of you may not have ever seen or engaged in a Palm Pilot, although it predated the BlackBerry and it predated the iPod. That beautiful piece of design right across the top is a stylus. And that stylus was used on that crystal clear LCD screen so that the users could take it and write something on the screen, and then what was written was saved in the device. That's how technologically advanced it was. And there was no Wi-Fi. There was no cellular connection, at least not in the early models. Eventually it came over time. What people would do is they would input all of their digital content into this device, and they'd carry it around with them. And what became popular ultimately was plugging this device into their desktop computer and transferring content from one space to another, and then walking over to somebody else's computer and plugging it in there. And actually, one of the most popular uses for the Palm Pilot came out of the education space. A lot of students, for the very first time, were able to upload their work textbooks into this Palm Pilot and didn't have to carry around big, huge backpacks. But something that sparked a really interesting direction for Palm Pilot was a very specific and small function. But it was significant in that Palm Pilot eventually figured out that people wanted to be able to transfer money from one device to another, right? It's part of the social engagement. How are we going to send some money from one Palm user to another? So that was something that they built into their ecosystem. And it was pretty popular, and it continued really the strength and the market growth of Palm Pilot. And this is not just me saying this stuff. You can look this up. Palm Pilot is really known as the world's first wildly successful handheld digital device. But something came along that disrupted Palm Pilot, and it was completely unforeseen, and it was so far outside of their lens. And that something was email. See, in the mid to late 1990s, email really started to pick up. And as soon as people could transfer big files from one computer to another electronically, they didn't really need that intermediary device. They didn't need the thing that they were using to transfer all that stuff back and forth. And so what happens to Palm Pilot when email comes along? Well, we're talking about this in the form of reinvention. And the team at Palm Pilot recognized that the disruption had come and that it would change their trajectory forever. And so they focused on one core element of their device that had seen a lot of success and a lot of uptake. And that core element was that actual functionality of transferring money from one device to another. And they focused on it because they believed that the original idea of the Palm Pilot was to transfer data from one person to another and to make it portable. And if people were using that on a small scale to transfer funds from one device to another, could they do it on a large scale? And they did. They completely reinvented their organization, and they created one of the largest digital platform for electronic funds transfers around the world. PayPal. That's right. PayPal came from the original founders of the Palm Pilot. PayPal now is still huge. It's got a massive presence around the world, transfers billions and billions of dollars. But what's interesting is PayPal actually came into place largely because in the late 90s, the first e-commerce digital platform took over. And that e-commerce digital platform was eBay. And eBay was huge. It was the first time you could buy and sell and all around the world. And there needed to be a focal point for financial transactions. And that's where PayPal came in. And they're still extremely popular today. And how much was reinvention a part of the culture of the Palm team and the PayPal team? So much so that an original group of founders of the organization PayPal, they're actually affectionately referred to as the PayPal Mafia. They went on to create some of their own companies and other companies you may actually recognize. YouTube, LinkedIn, Tesla, all came from founders of PayPal. In fact, Elon Musk was one of the early CEOs of PayPal. This is a reinvention story. This is the power of reinvention. Palm is gone. The Palm Pilot is virtually erased from the present digital device market. But reinvention was present and forced those founders to create something that was completely new, but founded in the original idea of that successful device. And that's what we're going to talk about more today, and how this applies to you in your career, in your business. We're going to talk about reinvention, because reinvention, believe it or not, is a process, and it contains elements that you yourself can master. And that's the point. We're going to be grounded in this for you. How does this relate to you? That's what you should be asking yourself. So let's take a look at this concept of reinvention. It's interesting that sometimes we put these cryptic little codes into our language so that it's there for us in the future to remember. So there are two components of this word reinvention. There's the re, so to repeat, to reiterate, to revisit. And then there's the invention. And what is an invention? Well, an invention is a creation. In the world of change and transformation and theory and all of the things that happen out there, we refer to that as invention, as the original idea. So reinvention, change, transformation is ultimately about reiterating the original idea. And why that's so significant and so important is sometimes reinvention, change, transformation gets a bad rap. And that bad rap is this: scrap everything we knew before and start again. That's not actually a healthy way to approach reinvention. It's not actually very practical. That's just kind of creation. And if you want to go over somewhere else and do something completely new, then you should do something completely new. But reinvention, change, and transformation is ultimately about reiterating, repeating, revisiting that original idea. It's about creating the best element of those ideas in the present moment that we're facing right now. So let's talk a little bit about how that works. How do you thrive in an era of disruption? This is a really profound and important question, because this is not just about survival. This is not just about getting back to where we were before. This is about how we thrive in an era of disruption. Well, Joe Jackman, author of The Reinventionist Mindset, an amazing consultant who runs his own organization that leads transformation programs and processes through corporate companies all around the world. He wrote a great book called The Reinventionist Mindset, and he was actually one of the keynote speakers at Restaurants Canada show a couple of years before we entered this crazy pandemic time. So very interesting. So Joe Jackman tells us that if we want to thrive in an era of disruption, we reinvent, because change is everywhere and it's coming for us fast. So we are well and truly living in an era of disruption right now. But the truth of the matter is, we were living in an era of disruption before this pandemic hit. And through our lives, our professional lives and our personal lives, we will be in an era of disruption again. A lot of experts out there were calling for the great disruption to be one based on technology. How technology was going to come along and disrupt businesses, right? We talk about the Kodak disappearing from existence. We talk about Blockbuster Video disappearing from existence and things like Netflix coming along. All of that disruption was definitely relevant. But few people, with a couple of notable exceptions, believed that the real global disruption would come from biology rather than technology. But nonetheless, there are some things that we can learn and some things that we can apply to get us through the challenges that we're experiencing right now and to get us to a place of thriving in an era of disruption. If you spent any time with me when we talked about emotional intelligence, you will know this. I am your biggest advocate for living the best life you can possibly live. Surviving, getting through, getting by is just not enough. I want you up on your feet. I want you yelling and screaming at the top of your lungs because you are achieving everything that you want to achieve within your business, within your personal life, within your professional life. This is about thriving. Why am I stuck here? All right. So let's talk a little bit about hospitality, because that is the core element and the core reason why we're here today. So who needs to reinvent hospitality? If we are going to go through a reinvention process for hospitality, who needs to do it? Well, ultimately, I believe there are 3 layers of reinvention, and this will make sense to you. So there are hospitality professionals who need to reinvent themselves. That's you, for the most part, as individuals and as business leaders. There are the hospitality businesses. And then, of course, there's the hospitality industry at large. You see, you can't call for the reinvention of an industry and expect that it's going to be top down. No great, lasting, sustainable change in history has ever come because somebody at the top said, we're going to change and this is how we're going to do it, and pushed it all the way down. We've all been in corporate environments where that has happened. People have tried to make that happen, but I'm telling you, it is very rarely ever successful. Transformation, true, lasting, impactful change starts with the people at the core. And the hospitality industry is a great example of that. Our industry, our business is ultimately about people. So if we are going to reinvent hospitality, which we are in the process of, and we need to continue to do so, it's the professionals, it's the business, and then it's the industry at large. And so again, that can be a bit abstract. What needs to be reinvented? Well, the truth of the matter is hospitality professionals need to reinvent their skills. It's really interesting that we got a chance to talk about emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence is a whole lexicon of skills. It's a whole place where you can develop and improve and grow. That's what's beautiful about EQ over IQ. People say that IQ is relatively static. You get to a certain age in your life and you remain the same. Your IQ doesn't really change, with few exceptions. EQ, emotional intelligence, can change as you develop and you focus and you challenge yourself. You improve your emotional intelligence. That's part of the process of reinventing hospitality. Hospitality professionals need to focus on reinventing their skills. Second layer is the businesses. Well, the businesses need to focus on reinventing their strategies. And that's largely what this week is about for you. How do we engage in the work of hospitality on campus or student service on campus or any of the broader environments that we're in? We need to reinvent our strategies. We cannot go forward with the same mentality and the same practices as we had pre-pandemic. And then at a very high level and at a larger scale and at a broader scale, we need to reinvent policies. Influential organizations, associations really need to revisit and reinvent their policies. So reinvention ultimately takes place at 3 levels. Let's take a few deep breaths here for a second. We've already covered a lot of ground. Just wanted to give you the heads up that we're going to shift into a bit of direction for you. So I want to talk about how we reinvent hospitality. And I want to share 3 elements that are present in all reinvention, all change, all transformation contains components of these 3 elements. So again, this is not just about hospitality. This is about change. This is about transformation. This is about reinvention. And you can apply this in every level of your life and every business that you engage in. This is not sequential. This is not linear. There are 3 elements where each element needs to be present for sustainable reinvention, transformation, and change. Let's talk about those elements. The first is resilience. We've certainly heard a lot about resilience, and we have demonstrated resilience over the last year or so. We'll talk about that, what that means, how you develop it. Adaptive capacity. It's a bit of a newer concept. I like to align adaptive capacity with growth, our ability to change, our ability to realize and create change. And finally, vulnerability. We don't really like to talk about vulnerability all that much. Some people are a bit uncomfortable talking about vulnerability. Maybe it's because we just don't know what it is. But the fact of the matter is, reinvention, change, transformation, all of it, when it's done well and done sustainably, contains these 3 elements: resilience, adaptive capacity, and vulnerability. Let's talk about what that means. So what is resilience? Really interesting question. We have heard a lot about the resilience that we, as individuals, as professionals, as an industry, have demonstrated over the last year or so. But if I was to ask all of you right now and what resilience was, we'd probably get a few different answers. So let's look for a clear definition that helps us understand what resilience is. Adam Grant, professor at Wharton, social psychologist, author of Think Again, a great book. I'm recommending 3 readings for you today. And if you can't get to the readings, find their podcasts. These are amazing, amazing resources. Adam Grant has a podcast called Work Life, work/life. Really, really helpful. He believes that resilience is the strength and speed of our response to adversity. Really interesting definition. And I think that it serves very, very profoundly. The interesting thing about resilience, and we talked about it in our conversation about emotional intelligence. Well, resilience is actually a skill that can be learned and a skill that can be developed. And you ask yourself, okay, so how do I do that? I haven't really experienced a resilience course. Right. Well, here's my question. Reflecting on your experience, Have you ever had to respond to adversity in your life, in your personal life, in your professional life? Of course you have. So how did you do that? How did you respond to the adversity that you experienced throughout your life, throughout your career? And if you reflect on how you got through it before, if you reflect on how you overcame the challenges in your personal and professional life before, there are nuggets of wisdom in there, skill that can be developed. Resilience is the strength and the speed of our response to adversity. When your resistance is low, when you're tired, when you're burnt out, when you haven't been taking care of yourself, something happens in front of you and it's a huge deal, right? Oh my God, I can't believe this happened. When you are rested, when you are balanced, when you are focused, when you are feeling your best, something happens and what? No big deal. We'll deal with that. We'll get through that because you have perspective, because you have strength, because you have capacity. That's what resilience is all about. The strength and speed of our response to adversity. We'll keep that in mind as we go forward. There is no change, there is no transformation, there is no reinvention without resilience. As you can imagine, and as you have experienced, going through a reinvention, a change, transformation is fraught with events that cause you struggle. And your ability to respond to that adversity and get back to the place where you are doing your best work and living your best life, that's resilience. First component, resilience. Second component, adaptive capacity. I know this may sound theoretical. Stick with me. I promise it's all going to make sense. What is adaptive capacity? Well, I believe adaptive capacity is the ability of an individual or a group to realize change. What does that mean? People talk a lot about capacity. You certainly understand it from a business perspective. Capacity is, well, how much? How much can we handle? How much can we take? That kind of capacity is important. It's important for you to understand from your business, from your personal life, yes. But it's actually your capacity to change that contributes to realizing change, to getting where you want to go. And like I said, adaptive capacity, the other word for adaptive capacity is just growth. Growth is a key to transformation, change, and reinvention. Of course, think about it in your personal life. When you were somewhere and you wanted to go somewhere else, you had to grow. And growth is kind of funny for us. Sometimes it's really painful, right? Sometimes it is something keeps happening that reminds us that something needs to change. And then finally we say, okay, I'm going to head that way. And then we get to a place of understanding and we can really start to handle that. Adaptive capacity is the key to life beyond the pandemic. Think about that when you are getting back to work, or if you're in work still, think about that when your work volume improves, increases, personally, professionally. Your ability to realize change, to bring change to fruition, your adaptive capacity determines your ability to succeed, to thrive, to grow. All right, let's keep going. What is vulnerability? Certainly, if you were with me talking about emotional intelligence, this is not new to you. But again, let's look to the experts for a really great definition. Here's my third recommendation. We got The Reinventionist Mindset by Joe Jackman. We got Think Again by Adam Grant, and Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. Author, scholar, researcher, an incredible presenter, bringing vulnerability into the mainstay of the leadership space, which we all occupy. So vulnerability is about embracing uncertainty, risk, exposure. I would say since March of last year, we have all been living in an uncertain, risk-filled, and exposed world. Vulnerability is about embracing those things. And we'll talk about how that all plays out a little bit later on. But it's interesting, right? Sometimes people think about vulnerability and they think, well, isn't being vulnerable ultimately the opposite of being resilient? Well, I don't think so. I think vulnerability is the opposite of perfectionism, right? If we are walking around as individuals, as professionals, as businesses saying, hey, we can't improve on anything. We're great. I'm great. My business is great. Everything's going great. Nothing can touch us. What happens? Something comes along, boom, pushes us over the edge. Things completely change. Vulnerability is actually a really great measure of courage. Yeah. Embracing uncertainty, risk, and exposure. The fact of the matter is, we are living in a world filled with uncertainty, risk, and exposure. And most of the time, the only time that we think that we aren't is when we really aren't paying attention, because those elements are everywhere and there are ways that we can embrace them. Now, I don't believe that vulnerability is telling everybody everything. I don't believe vulnerability is breaking down and constantly telling your staff or your teams or your friends that everything is really bad. If you are experiencing challenges in your personal life, in your professional life, and you are starting to see and notice that these things are really overshadowing your work or your ability to get out of bed or carry on with your life, this is really a key moment for you to find resources to reach out and to get the help that you need. And I know that this association and this group is very focused on that. So don't ever skip over how you're feeling. If you are feeling like things are going really, really badly, be courageous as much as you can. And if it can't be you, then it needs to be the people you work with, your friends, your family. Find ways. We have to keep an eye on each other. We have to connect each other to the resources that we need so that we can be okay. Because the fact of the matter is, uncertainty, risk, and exposure is everywhere. And it's a huge part of our lives. And we can find our way to learn how to embrace those things to really get back to thriving. So I wanted to just take a moment. We've covered a lot of ground. I want to take a moment to reframe the elements of reinvention for you in something that is so simple and something that is so present in our lives that can serve as a reminder for you of reinvention, change, transformation. You see, the natural environment lives and thrives in a state of reinvention. Everything in our natural environment is constantly changing. Plants, animals, the environment. So how does reinvention play out here? Well, this to me is the clearest indication of the reinvention process. Resilience is ultimately what happens below the earth line, right? You take a look at this beautiful little plant. Resilience is our roots, our strength, our speed as we respond to adversity. The deeper the roots, the more developed our resilience, the better we are positioned to grow, to change, to thrive. Adaptive capacity. Well, just as said previously, adaptive capacity is growth. It's what happens above that earth line, right? Our ability to realize change is our ability to grow. The natural environment is constantly in a state of growth. And sometimes the concept of vulnerability can be a little hard to pack into our minds as we think about how we embrace a life filled with change and reinvention. But remember, vulnerability is embracing uncertainty, embracing risk, and embracing exposure. And I really think that the natural environment is the best demonstration of this concept. You see, this plant right here embraces uncertainty, risk, and exposure. How? In the form of the elements. This plant cannot grow unless it embraces the wind, embraces the sun, embraces the other animals around it, embraces the other plant life around it, embraces the air, the oxygen. This is a really, really powerful example of how you embrace vulnerability to thrive, to grow, and to reinvent. And I use this as an example because I want to give this to you. I want to give this gift to you. As you are experiencing your days in your personal life or your professional life, and you are realizing and you are recognizing that you need to change something within yourself, within your career, within your business, can be really practical, or it can be really big and philosophical within inside yourself. Go for a walk. Get outside, and if you can't get outside, find a plant that's growing in your house. Look at the food in your fridge that was once alive. The natural environment gives us the blueprint, the roadmap to change, to reinvention, to transformation. Because the reality of the situation is, without reinvention, what comes next? The end, right? Not everything is eternal. Us as individuals, our jobs, our careers, our businesses. If we aren't constantly reinventing, well, we will find an end. And I think that that's really powerful. It does not need to be a place of fear for you. It needs to be a place of reassurance for you that every element of your life is better when you are embracing change, transformation, reinvention. And how do you do it? You do it by focusing intentionally on resilience, adaptive capacity, vulnerability. And examples of this are everywhere. So we've gone theoretical, we've talked about systems theory, we've talked about the presence of reinvention in the natural environment. Let's bring it back to what we're talking about today. What does reinvention look like for hospitality? What does it look like for us in our jobs, in our lives, where we're committed to this industry, this concept of hospitality? So let's go back to Joe Jackman, because this is a really important, powerful statement. And it speaks to some of the things we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, especially as it relates to what reinvention really actually is. The surest way to stay true to who you are, company, brand, or individual, is to reinvent so as to continually become the most powerful and relevant version of yourself. You see, reinvention, change, transformation is not about throwing everything away and starting again. That is true for you as an individual. It's true for your job. It's true for your business. The truth of the matter is, the surest way to stay true to who you are is to spend the time to take yourself and your company through the process of reinvention. So to become the most powerful and relevant version of yourself. If you heard my talk on emotional intelligence, you will know that that is tremendously important and tremendously powerful. What does it mean for hospitality right here, right now? That we aren't trying to start from scratch. that we are actually trying to be the most powerful and relevant version of ourselves for right now. Yep, we have been through all kinds of chaos over the last year and change. And what lies ahead is not a new normal by any stretch. What lies ahead is a constant state of flow and change and reinvention. And that's okay, because you are all now becoming reinventionists. You are going to recognize that the world we live in is constantly in a state of change, and that there's actually a way to harness that change. There's actually a way to stay true to yourself, to stay true to your business concept by reinventing, reiterating our original idea. And the whole point here is to continually become the most powerful and relevant version of yourself. Because reinvention is a continual process. And when you accept that, and when you really put it out every single day, that you are focusing on change and transformation and reinvention, you will be able to get to a place in your life, in your job, in your career, that you are actually becoming the most powerful and relevant version of yourself. It's kind of interesting when you think about it. If you can pull out and get beyond yourself for a second and recognize how much of your time, as it relates to things that stress you out, that bother you, that bug you, that keep you up at night, that make you feel anxious, are actually things you are trying to hold on to. Things need to be a certain way for me to feel a certain way. Things need to be a certain way so that I can be positive, engaged, happy. Work needs to be a certain way. My personal life needs to be a certain way. Your mind is taking you through a process of trying to hang on to things that are actually constantly in a state of flux. And as challenging as this concept becomes, or you tell somebody, okay, listen, just let go of all that. Let go of all that and carry on. It's really easy to say, really, really hard to do. So instead of letting go of things, how about accepting that the world you live in is in a constant state of change? As soon as you can accept that, you can recognize the moments where you yourself are being hung up because you want things to be a certain way. And the fact of the matter is, that certain way is either part of your past or part of your future that hasn't arrived yet. And that's why what we're trying to do is to become the most powerful and relevant versions of ourselves. That's it. Simple as that. Change, transformation, reinvention is a process that is everywhere around us. And when we learn how to harness it, our personal lives become better. Our professional lives become richer. Our careers continue to thrive. The businesses that we operate, the organizations that we work within, continue to thrive because we're trying to get to a place where we thrive despite the elements of change that are everywhere around us. So let's just take one last pull back on this here. We are trying to reinvent hospitality because we recognize that reinvention is everywhere. We understand a little more now than we did before about the reinvention process, about change, about transformation. We understand the elements. We understand that reinventing hospitality includes professionals, businesses, industry. It includes skills, strategies, policies. But if reinvention is ultimately about reiterating our original idea, our invention, then we should probably take a pretty critical look as we wrap up our time together today to ask ourselves, what is the original reinvention of hospitality. What is it that we collectively created when this industry was pulled together, when this industry started to carry its own title, its own weight? Well, very much like the reinvention process, the key to our original idea is actually built right here, right in this word for us to constantly remind ourselves. So what is it? Well, there are clearly two components of this word. There's hospital and there's the ITUI. So what is it that people seek from a hospital? Why do people go to a hospital? They go for care. You see, the original idea, our invention, our contribution to the world as the hospitality industry centers around care. Think about that for a second. Sometimes we lose it in our day-to-day businesses, but care is the core of what we do, whether it's accommodations, whether it's food service, even whether it's entertainment, events. Our role, our value to society, to businesses, is ultimately our ability to care. So if we are reinventing hospitality, if we are reiterating our original idea, and our original idea is care, then we need to reiterate that. We need to revisit that. We need to make sure that no matter what we do, we always remember that hospitality is ultimately about taking care of people. And as we look forward, you have an incredible week ahead of you. There are going to be a lot of practical conversations, tools, resources to help you put all of the pieces together you need to get back into a more normalized work environment as things start returning to pre-pandemic existence. Carry with you wherever you go that reinventing hospitality needs to be about revisiting, reiterating the original concept of taking care of people. And if taking care of people is at the core of what you do, and you understand and recognize the elements of reinvention that need to be present, then you will continue to thrive in this era of disruption. And you will become the most relevant and powerful version of yourself. And that is all anybody could ever ask of you as a hospitality professional. So I've come to the end of my time with you. Just humor me for another second, just as we did at the very beginning of the presentation. Just want you to adjust yourself a little bit in your chair. If you're standing up, stretch out. Plant your feet firmly back on the ground again. Put your hands on your legs. Just take a few breaths. We covered a lot of ground. We learned a lot about reinvention. And we know that we have a lot ahead of us. This is going to be an amazing week for you. And the months and the years ahead are also going to be amazing. Because within you, there's nothing you can't accomplish as long as you continue to learn and grow and develop and reinvent. I wish you nothing but success. You know how to find me if you were with me in our last conversation. I am everywhere at the Joe Baker. You can find me there. If you ever wondered what V stands for, it's tourism, hospitality, education, because those are the things that are of utmost importance to me. Find me everywhere, track me down. If you need help, if you want a conversation, if you want to talk something through, do not ever hesitate to reach out. I'm here. I'm happy to connect with you. And I am excited and look forward to the opportunity and the novelty of actually being physically present together in the same space. Maybe it'll be at next year's conference. Maybe it's in a small meeting. I just want you to know that I am here as a resource for you. I am always, always proud to be a part of the hospitality industry, regardless of how it plays out or what version of it we're living in. And I'm tremendously honored to have been able to spend a solid hour of time with you today, and really, really want to wish you nothing but success and luck and incredible joy as you experience the rest of the week and the months and the years ahead. Thank you all so much for your time.